Welcome to the Book of Deuteronomy, the fifth and final book of the Torah. The name Deuteronomy actually comes from a Greek mistranslation of the Hebrew name of the book. The Hebrew name means a copy of this law. The Greek Deuteronomy means second law. In the New Testament, Jesus quotes Deuteronomy more than any other Old Testament book. The structure of Deuteronomy as a whole is laid out in the way that many ancient peoples documented their legal agreements between one party and another. Deuteronomy fits neatly into the structure of what is known as a Suzerain-Vassal treaty. In the ancient Near East, the suzerain was the greater ruling party, and the vassal or vassals were the lesser party or parties who were subject to the suzerain. Agreements between the two parties followed specific procedures. The elements of a vassal treaty include 1. The preamble, which identifies the parties of the treaty. 2. The historical prologue, which describes past relationship between the parties. 3. Stipulations and obligations assumed by both parties. 4. Deposit and periodic reading. 5. Witnesses, usually gods, but heaven and earth in Deuteronomy, and oaths sworn before them. And 6. List of blessings and curses for obedience or disobedience to stipulations. There are many similarities between the ancient vassal treaties and Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy says, Yahweh will smite you with Egyptian inflammation, and with scars from which you will never recover. And the vassal treaty says, Mesim, clothe you with leprosy. Deuteronomy says, Yahweh will smite you with madness, blindness, and confusion of mind, and you will grope at noon as the blind person gropes in the darkness. And the vassal treaty says, May Shamash not render you a just judgment, and not give you a reliable decision. May he deprive you of the sight of your eyes, so that you will wander about in darkness. Deuteronomy says, Your corpses will be food for all the birds of heaven and beasts of the earth. And the vassal treaty says, May Ninurta fell you with a swift arrow, may he fill the steppe with your corpses, may he feed your flesh to the vulture and the jackal. Deuteronomy says, You will betroth the wife, but another man will lie with her. And the vassal treaty says, May Venus, the brightest star, make your wives lie in your enemy's lap while your eyes look. Deuteronomy says, You will build a house, but not dwell in it. Your sons and daughters will be given to another people. And the vassal treaty says, May your sons not be masters of your house. Deuteronomy says, Another nation which you have not known will devour the fruit of your ground and of your labors. And the vassal treaty says, May a foreign enemy divide all your goods. On a side note, modern English translators have sometimes found awkward passages in the Bible that they felt would be offensive to many Christian readers, so they sometimes rephrase some rather blunt and, at times, crass language into more polite renderings. Deuteronomy 28:30 is an example of this. Modern translators have that verse read, You will betroth the wife, but another man will lie with her. However, in Hebrew, the phrase we translate as lie with her is much stronger and is not considered a very nice word at all. In fact, the closest English equivalent would be the F word. So yeah, that's in the Bible. The first major portion of Deuteronomy is made up of Moses retelling the history of Israel after they left Egypt. He recounts the leaving of Mount Horeb, appointment of leaders, sending out spies, Israel's rebellion, wandering in the wilderness, the defeat of Sihon, the defeat of Og, dividing up the land, how Moses was forbidden to enter the promised land, the story of the golden calf, and the new tablets. Moses then recounts the law of the Lord, such as the 10 Commandments, the Shema, driving out nations. He tells the people not to forget the Lord and to love and obey the Lord, instructs them again on how to set up the tabernacle, tells them not to worship other gods, describes clean and unclean food, tithes, the Sabbath year, the festivals, wartime, marrying foreigners, courts, kings and prophets, and miscellaneous laws. The Shema contains one of the daily prayers of the Jews. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema means hear or listen. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Or, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Or, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is the Lord alone. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. In the New Testament, Jesus said that this commandment was the greatest commandment of them all. If you keep this one law, you are keeping all of God's laws. If you break this one law, you are breaking all of God's laws. Deuteronomy also places strict rules on the kings of Israel. The king must not be a foreigner. The king must not have many horses. The king must not have many wives. The king must not have much gold or silver. And the king must carry a copy of the law with him to read every day. So, why all the rules for Israel's kings when Israel had no king at the time? Possibly because by the time the scribes finished putting all these laws together into one unified law of Moses, so much time had passed that Israel actually did have kings at that point, so special emphasis may have been placed on these kingly commands because of this. We see later how Israel's kings pretty much broke all these rules all of the time. And God also says, I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their fellow Israelites, and I will put my words in his mouth. But why are prophets needed? Well, because Israel demanded an intermediary at Sinai, and we learn that the prophet of God must not practice sorcery or divination, say God said something that God didn't say, or speak in the name of other gods. And the test of a true prophet is, if what the prophet says does not come true, he must have been lying. Moses also commanded the tribes of Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin to stand on top of Mount Gerizim once they had entered the Promised Land, and pronounce the blessings that would take effect if Israel was faithful to the covenant. And he also commanded the tribes of Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali to stand on top of Mount Ebal once they had entered the Promised Land, and pronounce the curses that would take effect if Israel was unfaithful to the covenant. And Moses wrote down the law of the Lord and placed it with the Ark of the Covenant for future generations to read. And he told Joshua to be strong and courageous, as he would be the new leader of Israel. Moses predicted that after his own death, Israel would surely turn away from God and worship other gods, and he said that God would eventually destroy their land because of this. The end of the book contains the Song of Moses, which is thought to be the oldest text within Deuteronomy. It explains that in the beginning, El Elyon divided up the peoples of the earth and gave them land according to the number of the sons of God. This song seems to indicate that the gods of other nations were living deities, and that God allowed the different peoples to practice polytheism. However, Israel's God is above all these other deities, and he chose Israel out of all the peoples to be his chosen people. It also indicates that it was in God's plan that the other nations would worship other gods, but that Israel would worship him alone. Other texts show Israel's role in the world to be to introduce the rest of the peoples of the earth to their God, but they often failed at this task. Paul addresses this issue in the New Testament in Acts 17:26-30. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands, so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. We should not think that the divine being is an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. And after the Song, Moses blesses the tribes. To Reuben he says, let Reuben live and not die. To Judah he says, help him. And of Levi, he guards your covenant, he teaches your precepts to Israel, he offers incense before you. Simeon is not mentioned, perhaps because by the time the scribes got around to writing this down, no one was repeating blessings for Simeon because Simeon had been absorbed by Judah. Of Benjamin he says, he is a shield, and of Joseph, all good blessings go to Joseph, he is a prince among his brothers. Ephraim and Manasseh are very numerous. Of Zebulun and Issachar, Zebulun goes out, Issachar stays in his tent, both will be rich. Of Gad, he chose the best land, he's a leader, he's a ferocious lion. Of Dan, he's a lion's cub. Naphtali, he will inherit southward to the lake. And of Asher, your brothers will favor you, you will be very strong. The end of Deuteronomy is seen as a eulogy honoring Moses. Moses climbed to the top of Mount Nebo and viewed the Promised Land, but did not enter it. He died on top of the mountain at the age of 120, but the text says that despite his age, he was still vibrant and full of life. It also says that God himself buried Moses, and that no one knows where he is buried, and that since then, no prophet has ever been as great as Moses.